Hey folks, I'm Violet Hategan, owner of Wild Violet Oracle and Wild Violet Birth Keeper.
My name is Nicole Steinberg. I am owner of Forget Me Not, taking a holistic approach to end-of-life planning, and we are your Designated Doulas. So we are here to educate and advocate
for your birth and death wishes. And we're both very excited to begin sharing this podcast. So join us on this journey of discussions of full circle, full scope, birth and death.
We'll talk to you about doulas, what a doula is, options for birth and options for death, so that you know that you're not born into this world alone. You also don't have to leave this world alone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first Designated Doulas podcast. So today we're just going to chat a little bit about who we are, introduce ourselves to you, and talk to you about how we came together and decided to be here chatting with you. You want to start?
Yeah.
All right.
So again, my name is Violet Hategan, the owner of Wild Violet Oracle and Wild Violet Birth Keeping. I am a traditional Usui Reiki master and an educator. I'm also a psychic medium. And now I am embarking on this journey of really stepping into doula work and supporting birthing parents. A little bit about how I got into this. Of course, I do energy work. If you're not familiar with it, Reiki is really addressing the energetic body housed within our physical body. And I seem to kind of get this theme of women and infertility, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And that really started to spark my interest in supporting birthing people. And upon my recent birth of our first son, I knew it was time to really embark on this journey fully.
That's awesome. I'm really excited to tell you how we met, by the way. So I'm Nicole Steinberg, and I am the owner of Forget Me Not. I take a holistic approach to end-of-life planning, or as I like to say, death planning. I was terrified of death, and when I moved to the state of Washington, I threw myself in a mortuary service to basically try to confront my fears of death. And I found out that I really love working in this field, and I love working with others to make them not fearful of death. You know, death is something that's inevitable, and in our culture, it's taboo to talk about it, and I want to break that. I don't want it to be taboo to talk about. By talking about it and confronting it on my own, I am no longer fearful of it. I also am an intuitive healer, and so that's where Violet and I ended up
Connecting.
My intuitive healing sessions, a lot of times people were drawn to come to me that went through traumatic experiences with death, and I got to help them through that. And I manage a chiropractic office, and Violet came in to see.
We had just moved back up from California, and my previous chiropractor referred me to your office. She referred a couple of them, but I ended up choosing this office because it just seemed in alignment. Yeah. And when I was checking out, I see this little Reiki card, and I was like, oh, you guys do Reiki here too, rad. And she's like, or Nicole's like, oh yeah, I do Reiki. And I was like, I do Reiki too. So we really just connected on a personal level, and to connect with someone in this realm of work that really feels in alignment and feels really good to be around is really few and far between. So we immediately clicked, and I was like, let's get together if you're free. And lo and behold, she lives right across the street from me.
Yeah. We actually met for coffee, and Violet says, I never do this. I never just meet up with people like this. And I was like, well, funny that you say that, because I do love doing this, but I don't normally meet up with people and connect the way we did. And I said, I think I told you on our first meeting, I said, you're the yin to my yang.
Yeah.
And then we realized that both of us were in school to be doulas at the same time, Violet for birth. Yeah. And me for death. So she really was the yin and my yang. And then through time and friendship, we just decided that this was something that we needed to do together.
Yeah. We both felt really called to hold space in these discussions, fully supporting people in the inevitable birth and death. Mm-hmm. And really full scope advocating for the options that we all really have but might not know about.
I think we connected to, there's different avenues that you can take being a doula, a death doula and a birth doula. We'll talk more in depth probably in some of our other podcasts about this, the difference between a birthing doula and a birthing midwife, and the difference between a death doula and a death midwife. But both of us, what really resonates with us is the planning process and knowing your options that you have for a good birth and a good death.
All right, so let's jump right into what is a doula. You may have heard this word, you may have never heard this word, and I think it's totally appropriate that we jump into a little bit of the history of what a doula is and how it's transpired over the centuries.
I like it. I like it.
So doula, the word actually is derived from Greek, meaning woman's servant. But of course, over the years, that has very much shifted and evolved in many ways. Today, a doula is defined as someone who is emotionally supporting and advocating for a either birthing person or person who is at the end of life. And you don't have to be a woman to this day to be a doula. In fact, I had a man that was studying to become a doula too, which was so rad. I totally support, people stepping out of those norms because our society and our world is changing in so many ways. And to recognize that traditionally speaking doesn't necessarily need to be today,
right,
I think is really important. And what Nicole and I both really felt strongly about in holding this podcast and holding space for our clients is to be able to advocate for everyone.
Yes, absolutely. Education process too. I mean, there's a lot of education out there for the planning process. And so we're going to help with education as well. But there's a couple of differences between a birthing doula and a end-of-life doula. And we'll kind of get into that as well. But like Violet said, you don't have to be a woman who serves. You can be a man who serves. Our goal as doulas is to create an environment for the family, or the person passing away or the person giving birth, and hold space for them so that they don't feel like they're alone and it's not scary. We want to make it a good birth, a good death. Now, there's a couple of differences between doulas that we'll talk about because they're not quite the same, but we achieve the same goal. But at least in the death world, a death doula is also a death midwife, is also a spiritual midwife. Thanatology is the study of death, dying, and bereavement, and there is also a thana doula or end-of-life doula. There's just a lot of terms for a doula when it comes to end-of-life. And I think when it comes to birth, there is birth doulas and there's birth midwives, correct?
Yes, but a midwife would have the medical background to be there for the birth.
Okay, and that's actually a really good point. Doulas don't provide medical assistance. We are a non-medical support system for you. So doulas will work with birthing midwives as well, right? So
yes,
birthing
absolutely.
Doulas work with birthing midwives?
Midwives, OBs, who's ever birthing your baby. Doulas themselves are really there to hold space again in making sure that you understand what your options are. Also holding that emotional support through the process, and making sure that you know your options.
Okay. I love this. I love talking about this because where death is such a morbid subject or perceived as a morbid subject, and I don't see that. To me, actually birth is a little bit morbid. So I love teaming up with Violet because she's like, no, Nicole, it's beautiful and this is why. And I love children, but the whole birthing process to me is scary and weird and a little morbid. So it's kind of fun to talk about like options there too, because as she's talking to me and educating me on a birthing scale or a birthing platform, I'm like, oh, maybe had I have known that a long time ago, or that this was my option, or that I could have like a water birth at home, like maybe I would have done things differently when I was younger. Probably not, but maybe, it's kind of cool. And we've talked a lot about end of life too. and are going to continue to talk about end of life and the support that there is there. End of life doulas will work not a lot closely. That doesn't make sense. It works closely with hospice too. We're the non-medical providers, but there are hospice nurses and people that work medically end of life that are also doulas. And because they've worked in palliative care their whole life, or because they've worked in hospice their whole life, and now maybe they're retired, they're giving back to their community by being an end of life doula, holding space for the family and the person passing away to make sure that they have a good death. And I feel like that is the same for birthing doulas too, right? There are women out there who have been birthing midwives or have been like in hospital arrangements that now are doulas and holding space spiritually.
And vice versa too. I know a lot of doulas that are working on their midwifery.
Okay.
Yeah. So they could be the whole scope of it too.
Yeah. It's cool. I mean, there's a circle of life here.
Absolutely.
And, as being the designated doulas, we just want to make sure that you get home safe, whether that's to your new home or your final home, safe, held, seen. We have a lot of movements going on right now in our progressive world that I love, and honoring an individual for who they are is really important right now. I feel like doulas can help with that process. I feel like, at least I'll talk from my side, but to honor an individual for how they identify, for who they are as an individual. Maybe they were raised with a religious belief, but they don't resonate with that anymore. And that's hard to talk to their family about. By pre-planning and working with an end-of-life doula, at least in my capacity, we really honor who you are as an individual. So when you're passing, your family can honor you too. And I feel like it's the same with birth.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. And I just wanted to add to this too, which might sound morbid, but you will experience this when you conceive a baby, when you're carrying a baby, and even after you have a child. The topic of, if something were to happen, what do you have in place? And I remember going through my pregnancy, and that was something that was brought up, and my husband and I both were like, oh, you don't think about it, but it can happen. And so to the point of what Nicole does, which I think is so fascinating and also really important, is that even though you're young, you don't know what tomorrow will bring. Becoming a parent really opened my eyes to the fact that I need to make sure I have things put in place for now my child and my husband. And I can speak of this from experience as well. I lost my mother at a very young age, and there was nothing set into place. And anyone who's lost someone close to them that may be in charge of their affairs after the fact, if there's nothing put into place, it is a experience.
Yeah, that's a great way to sum it up. It's an experience. It's stressful.
Very stressful.
It's not what you want to deal with when you're starting your grieving process. So today is October 15th. So it's actually kind of a really cool and ironic day to have our first podcast. Today is
Infant Loss and Remembrance Day.
Yeah.
And Infant Loss Month. Awareness Month.
Awareness Month. Yes. So not only, are we looking at plans and pre-planning and options for us now that we have children, now that you have children, and what you want to do moving forward, but also awareness that infant loss and child loss is a thing as well. And we don't like to talk about that a whole lot, but we'll have podcasts where we talk about that subject matter and kind of how to support you in and around that. And I think Violet will too, because being a birth doula, this is something that comes up, and parents do ask about these situations.
Definitely. And I can also speak from an empathetic point of view from clients I've worked with that have experienced loss, both in supporting them energetically and through mediumship.
Yeah.
And it is, I don't want to say it's common, but it can happen.
Right.
So I think it is important that we talk about these things that may be considered taboo, for the simple fact of putting that awareness out there for if it's happened to someone or if it does happen to someone, that they know that there is a support out there for them.
And how to move forward, right?
And how to move
move forward so that you're not scared to try again.
Mm-hmm.
Because today is such a big day. Can you expand upon that? Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Maybe what happens or how you would support a parent if they do lose an infant?
Well, it's not just about infant loss. You can lose a parent during birth as well.
True. That's true.
So how would you actually support a parent in the process of preparing for that to possibly be a case?
Right. Well, I mean, that's what I do with Forget Me Not. My primary goal with Forget Me Not is to work with individuals who are not at end of life, have something in place for when that time comes. I don't say for if that time comes, for when that time comes, right? And like you said earlier, we don't know what tomorrow brings.
Mm-hmm.
This is great. I guess I didn't even think about, this is why we're doing this, right? I didn't even think about the fact that you could lose your life while giving life, right, to the world.
And I actually can share on this if you don't mind before you get into that. I had an amazing pregnancy. I had the most amazing birthing team, but upon delivering my placenta and we had a home birth, I actually hemorrhaged pretty significantly. And because I had such an amazing team, they were able to stop it before I had to basically be taken in the ambulance. But I lost a lot of blood, and I knew intuitively I was going to be okay, but I watched the look on my husband's face as he just is holding our brand new baby, and I'm having a pool of my own blood collect underneath me. And I don't know if I was in intuitive space, if I would have felt the courage I did in knowing that everything was going to be okay, but it was definitely a reality check that anything could happen. And I will say this in all actuality, if this happened 100 years ago, I wouldn't be here today.
Thanks for sharing. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Ugh, I learned.
It's healing talking about it. So thank you guys for listening.
Podcast. This is great. Yeah, okay. So you really hadn't had to face your mortality at that moment. And you had a team. Did you have a doula?
I did have a doula, and I had a midwife. Most doulas will not free birth, and a free birth is to basically give birth without a midwife or anyone with medical assistance or backup in the case that there's an emergency. Mm-hmm. I don't personally condone that because anything can happen, and just given my personal experience, anything can happen. So I had a doula. I had my midwife. I had my rad midwife's assistant, Raina, who was also a doula in midwifery training.
Okay.
My mother-in-law, my husband, had a whole team.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Super supported.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you need to be.
Yeah.
In birth and in death, you need to be supported.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Very cool. Is there anything that you can do? No, there's all kinds of stuff that you can do to prevent, but you do the best that you can. You don't know. Anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
Same
Anything
with
happened.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But for example, my placenta was extremely large, so that was part of the problem. And you can't judge that. You can't see that.
Right.
Prior to. You can see where the placenta is, but you don't always know the size of it. So anything can happen. So I wish I had found you before I had my son. But thank goodness everything happened the way it did, and we came together at this time.
And now
you get
to see me before you're next.
Yeah.
And now.
Yeah. In fact, we're meeting with you next month. My husband and I both. And we're in our early 30s.
Yeah. Well, it's good. It's good to get these things in place. And you don't have to legally get everything in place right now if you're not ready. At least me personally, I'm just a step one. I'm just to help you overcome your fear of talking about death and to give you options where you're like, oh gosh, being cremated or buried just doesn't sound good to me. Do I have any other options? Actually, yes. And we talk about those options for you too. But really what we create together and what we talk about is life. We don't really talk about death all the time. We talk about life and what is your life like and what brings joy to your life. And then that's what we give to your family upon your passing. It's honoring you for who you are during your life cycle. Yeah, Kind of went off on a tangent there.
That's okay.
But it's super important to pre-plan, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, and the same thing with birth. It is really important to pre-plan, and I think there's a lot of new desires in the birthing world today where people are wanting to have options. And it really just is given also in your pregnancy, how's everything going, but home births are becoming, again, very popular.
Mm-hmm.
Having that option to bring your child into this world in the comfort and safety of your home, and knowing also what your options are with that, I think is really important because...
So I'm going to tie that in full circle.
Yeah.
Just what I have it on my mind. You can also die at home. And we're coming full spectrum.
Yeah.
It used to be where a good death would be at home and not in a hospital. Not in that sterile, setting. Mm-hmm. To die at home with your family, with your loved ones, to be cared for at home.
Yeah. In your safe space.
In your safe space, right. And there's doulas, death doulas, or end-of-life doulas are there. They can have a ceremony with you. They can wash and shroud your body with your family present, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no laws against doing that, and I want to bring awareness back to that, where just like you're bringing awareness to the fact that you can have a home birth in the comfort of your home with your people.
Birth in the way that you desire to birth.
Same with death. You can have a death in the way that you desire to have a death. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So should we wrap at least this podcast up until next month? So we're going to be doing podcasts once a month, and we'll have different topics each time. But we really hope you join us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And continue to follow this journey. Again, I'm Wild Violet Birth Keeper.
Oh, and I am Forget Me Not Doula. We're on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, and I actually have a website.
I'm on Facebook too, actually.
You're on Facebook too? Yeah, okay. I have forgetmenotdoula.com. I have a website that you can go check out. Email us, contact us, ask us questions. Email us with questions. We'd love to talk about the questions that you have on our podcast, and bring them to light, because you're the reason we're doing this, to educate and advocate. So if there's something that you want us to advocate for, let us know. So we would love for you to reach out. There is a scroll on the bottom that gives you all of the information to contact us. Reach out. Let us know what you want us to advocate for, or hot topics that you want us to talk about. Violet and myself are both open and here to hear from you.
This is what we're here for.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, folks.